We had not been back in the post a week before we had something to talk about. A Mexican who was doing some work for the government came up to confer with the commanding officer as to details. He left the adjutant's office before midday and had not gone 1,000 yards, less indeed than rifle shot, from the door, when an Apache, lurking in ambush behind a clump of palmilla, pierced him through and through with a lance and left him dead, weltering in his own blood. To attempt pursuit was worse than useless, and all we could do was to bury the victim. It was this peculiarity of the Apaches that made them such a terror to all who came in contact with them, and had compelled the King of Spain to maintain a force of 4,000 dragoons to keep in check a tribe of naked savages who scorned to wear any protection against the bullets of the Castilians, who would not fight when pursued, but scattered like their own crested mountain quail, and then hovered on the flanks of the whites, and were far more formidable when dispersed than when they were moving in compact bodies. Now, this was simply the best military policy for the Apaches to adopt: wear out the enemy by vexatious tactics and by having the pursuit degenerate into a will-o'-the-wisp chase. The Apaches could find food on every hillside, and the waterhole springs and flowing streams far up in the mountains were perfectly well known to them. The Caucasian troops, of whatever nationality, would wander about, half crazed with thirst and maddened by the heat of the day or chilled by the cold winds of night in the mountains, and unable to tell which plants were of value as food and which were not. The Apache was in no sense a coward. He knew his business, and he played his cards to suit himself. He never lost a shot, and never lost a warrior in a fight where a brisk run across the nearest ridge would save his life and exhaust the heavily clad soldier who endeavored to catch him. Apaches in groups of 2 and 3, and even individual Apaches, were wont to steal in close to the military posts and ranchos and hide behind some sheltering rock or upon the summit of some conveniently situated hill, and there remain for days, scanning the movements of the Americans below and waiting for a chance to stampede a herd or kill a herder or two or jump a wagon train. They knew how to disguise themselves so thoroughly that one might almost step upon a warrior thus occupied before he could detect his presence. Stripped naked, with head and shoulders wrapped up in a bundle of yucca shoots or secatan grass, and with body rubbed over with the clay or sand along which it wriggled as sinuously and as venomously as the rattler itself, the Apache could and did approach to within earshot of the whites, and even entered the enclosures of the military camps, where we on several occasions discovered his footprints alongside the ollas or water jars. On such occasions he preferred to employ his lance or bow, because these made no sound, and half or even whole days might elapse before the stiffened and bloody corpse of the herder or wagoner would be found, and the presence of Indians in the vicinity become known. At least 20 such examples could be given from my knowledge, occurring at Prescott, Tucson, Camp Grant, Tres Alamos, Florence, Williamson's Valley, and elsewhere. They were regarded as the natural features of the country, and every settler rather expected them as a matter of course. Well did Torquemada, the Spanish writer, deplore the inability of the Spaniards to make headway against this tribe of naked savages. The Apache was a hard foe to subdue, not because he was full of wiles and tricks and experienced in all that pertains to the art of war, but because he had so few artificial wants and depended almost absolutely upon what his great mother, Nature, stood ready to supply. Starting out upon this warpath, he wore scarcely any clothing save a pair of buckskin moccasins reaching to mid-thigh and held to the waist by a string of the same material, a piece of muslin encircling the loins and dangling down behind about to the calves of the legs, a war hat of buckskin surmounted by hawk and eagle plumage, a rifle, the necessary ammunition and belt, or a bow with the quiver filled with arrows reputed to be poisonous, a blanket thrown over the shoulders, a watertight wicker jug to serve as a canteen, and perhaps a small amount of jerked meat, or else of pinole, or parched cornmeal. The medals, the Agnus Dei, or the rosary of the Mexican victims whom his rifle or arrow had deprived of life. To his captives, the Apache was cruel, brutal, merciless. If full of age, he wasted no time with them, unless on those rare occasions when he wanted to extract some information about what his pursuers were doing or contemplated doing, in which case death might be deferred for a brief few hours. Where the captive was of tender years, unable to get along without a mother's care, it was promptly put out of its misery by having its brains dashed against a convenient rock or tree. But where it happened that the raiders had secured boys or girls sufficiently old to withstand the hardships of the new life, they were accepted into the band and treated as kindly as if Apache to the manor born. The endurance of their warriors while on raids was something which extorted expressions of wonder from all white men who ever had anything to do with their subjugation. 75 miles a day was nothing at all unusual for them to march when pursued, their tactics being to make 3 or 4 such marches in the certainty of being able to wear out or throw off the track the most energetic and the most intelligent opponents. Their vision is so keen that they can discern movements of troops or the approach of wagon trains for a distance of 30 miles, and so inured are they to the torrid heats of the burning sands of Arizona, south of the Gila and northern Mexico, that they seem to care nothing for temperatures under which the American soldier droops and dies. The Apache, as a matter of fact, would strip himself of everything and travel naked, which the civilized man would not do, but the amount of clothing retained by the soldiers was too small to be considered a very important factor. If necessary, the Apache will go without water for as long a time almost as a camel. A small stone or a twig inserted in the mouth will cause a more abundant flow of saliva and assuage his thirst. He travels with fewer impedimenta than any other tribe of men in the world, not even excepting the Australians, but sometimes he allows himself the luxury or comfort of a pack of cards imitated from those of the Mexicans and made out of horsehide, or a set of the small painted sticks with which to play the game of tsechis, or on occasions when an unusually large number of Apaches happen to be traveling together, some one of the party will be loaded with the hoops and poles of the mushka, for be it known that the Apache, like savages everywhere, and not a few civilized men too, for that matter, is so addicted to gambling that he will play away the little he owns of clothing and all else he possesses in the world. Perhaps no instance could afford a better idea of the degree of ruggedness the Apaches attain than the one coming under my personal observation in the post hospital of Fort Bowie in 1886, where one of our Apache scouts was under treatment for a gunshot wound in the thigh. The moment Mr. Charles Loomis and myself approached the bedside of the young man, he asked for a tobacco smoke, which he received in the form of a bunch of cigarettes. One of these he placed in his mouth, and drawing a match, coolly proceeded to strike a light on his foot, which, in its horny, callous appearance, closely resembled the back of a mud tortoise. John G. Bourke, Captain, 3rd Cavalry.